Good evening and welcome to the show. I'm Sharri and here's what's coming up. Labor ministers signed off on attempts to resettle sex offenders in immigration detention before the High Court ruled such detention was illegal. This is in spite of them insisting they were confident they'd win the High Court decision and that their ruling caught them off guard. Joe Hildebrand and Liz Storer will join me later. The White House says Israel and Hamas will extend the pause in fighting by 2 days to secure the release of 20 more Israeli hostages. The mother of one boy being held by Hamas will join me tonight on the show in a live interview with a plea for her son to be released. Meanwhile, half of us report that we're financially worse off today than 2 years ago, with 60% of Australians wanting the government to do more about it. These damning polls for Anthony Albanese, I'll discuss them with James Morrow. But first tonight, an exclusive story. The New South Wales Teachers Federation is supporting a move for school teachers to wear the Palestinian keffiyeh, the checkered black and white scarf, into classrooms in public schools in a show of support with Palestinians. We can reveal that the Teachers and School Staff for Palestine group wrote on their Facebook page 2 days ago, and I quote, "From today, teachers can proudly and safely wear keffiyeh to work with backing of the New South Wales Teachers Federation. Our week of action has been extended for a week. Please take photos at work of teachers wearing keffiyeh or signs calling to end the siege and bombing of Gaza and send to us." They say if any principal tries to stop you, get the New South Wales Teachers Federation to speak to your principal. And then their post talks about amendments to a motion that was passed at the Teachers Federation State Council. And these amendments are, firstly, that the Teachers Federation will work with the Education Department to ensure that teachers will be free to show support to colleagues and students in Gaza affected by the humanitarian catastrophe without fear of code of conduct action. I'm going to come back to the code of conduct in a moment. They say, secondly, that the Teachers Federation will pursue with other unions sanctions against those who finance aggression, and this includes divestment by affiliated bodies. Thirdly, they say the Teachers Federation will work with the union movement to pressure the New South Wales Minns government to advocate for a ceasefire. And number four, that the Teachers Federation will encourage teacher contingents at the weekly protest for Gaza marches. Now, to say this is all highly offensive and deeply troubling is an understatement. This is pure anti-Semitism from public school teachers. It would unquestionably make Jewish children in public classrooms feel unsafe, threatened, alienated and bullied. This is disgusting bullying from teachers. This is racism from teachers against Jewish students. Those teachers can believe or think whatever they like. They can protest in their private time to their heart's content. But they have no right to bring it into the classroom and make the classroom an unsafe place for Jewish students. I actually can't believe this has been allowed to happen. We approached the New South Wales Teachers Federation for comment today and invited them on the program. They declined and instead sent us a statement where they said, and I quote, "Teachers must be afforded the professional respect to dress as they so choose. This includes those that choose to wear a keffiyeh or kippah." The outgoing president of the New South Wales Teachers Federation, Angelo Gavrilatis, tweeted this: How many more children must be killed before the world takes action against the state of Israel? Action against the state of Israel? What action is he actually demanding here? Then there's another tweet he sent where he said hospitals, schools, the wanton destruction and murder of innocent people continues unabated. He says enough in capital letters with an exclamation mark. Well, I'm sorry, but Israel is not committing murder of innocent civilians. That's what Hamas did to Israelis. Israel is taking every step, making every effort to protect civilian life, begging civilians to leave the war zone. He's also retweeted comments that Israel does not have a right of defence under international law. He's demanded a ceasefire now. He repeatedly demands a ceasefire. He even claims there's a genocide underway. Now, I always find it insightful to go back to the terror attacks on October 7 to see what these people, like the outgoing Teachers Federation president, were posting at that time. I mean, he's posted prolifically in support of Palestinians, but what did he say about Israelis on the day that they came under a terrorist attack? Well, for Angelo Gavrielatis, there was nothing on October the 7th, nothing on October the 8th, and then on October the 9th, he retweeted a Greens politician who said it was disgraceful for Defence Minister Richard Marles to claim that the attacks by Hamas were unprovoked, and that it's appalling that the Opera House will be lit up in support of Israel. So very instructive to learn that the outgoing head of the Teachers Federation was appalled about the Opera House being lit up in blue and white, the colours of the Israeli flag, in solidarity with Israel, and that he didn't make a single comment about the slaughter of Jewish life on October 7th in the most barbaric fashion we've ever seen. The whole purpose of the Teachers Federation is to improve teachers' working conditions and pay. They should have absolutely nothing to do with political protest. And the purpose of teachers, of course, are to educate our children, to improve the declining literacy and numeracy rates. Teachers have more important things to do than bring racism and hatred into the classroom. This encourages division, and it means that Jewish students who support Israel are at a very real risk of being bullied. I mean, this all truly makes my blood boil. So is the New South Wales government putting up with this? Do they have anything to say about this? Well, we asked the New South Wales Education Minister, Prue Carr, for comment today. She didn't give us a personal comment, but the Education Department responded and they told us, and I quote, that teachers are expected to be politically neutral during class, on school grounds, or any time they identify themselves as a New South Wales public school teacher. They say we provide clear guidance around this for all our employees in our code of conduct. It's understood that the department has reminded staff of their obligations to remain politically neutral, and that any teacher found to be in breach of the code of conduct would be subject to appropriate action. And the Department of Education says they don't endorse the activity of the Teachers for Palestine group. But what sort of message is it sending to teachers when you don't have the Education Minister standing up there saying this is unacceptable, you can't conduct political protests in the classroom? And as that statement said, it is against the Teachers' Code of Conduct. It's Section 10 of the New South Wales Teachers' Code of Conduct, and it says very clearly that what they do in their private capacity is one thing, but when they're on school grounds, when they're acting in their role as teachers, they have to be impartial. There can be no political protests, no political statements whatsoever. This is in black and white in their code of conduct. Now, this is deeply upsetting, but we're also seeing more and more Jewish-owned businesses being targeted by aggressive pro-Palestinian protests. The latest, the Anita ice cream chain. Now, this is a chain across Australia, but it also has a store in Canberra. And there are reports that customers were harassed and the shop was vandalised with anti-Israel stickers. And you can see it in this video. We need to make a stand of supporting businesses that are attacked like this. So if you're feel like an ice cream or a gelato over the next few days, we should all make sure to support this business. In fact, it's a good excuse to have an ice cream. Now, this type of anti-Semitism is why leaders across business, sport, media and politics signed a letter today calling for an end in the alarming explosion in hatred towards Jews. There are double-page advertisements in papers across the country today. You can see it here on the front page of the Financial Review. It featured the names of 600 high-profile Australians from across the political divide who are all supporting this call for unity. And by the way, 400 of those 600 people who signed this letter are not Jewish. This is a show of support and solidarity. It's to let the Jewish community know that we're not alone. The letter calls out a 482% rise in anti-Semitic incidents over the past 7 weeks that the letter says has swept Australia's shores. It says these leaders will not tolerate racism of any kind in their workplaces. They firmly reject it in their communities. Now, that figure of 482%, I mean, you have to remember, these are just reported anti-Semitic incidents. I would say that probably half the number of people who experience anti-Semitism don't report it. I know I have it extensively on my own personal social media. I never report it. The reality is, and I don't even have to tell you this, we've never ever seen anti-Semitism like this in Australia. Now, among the leaders who signed this very important letter, 19 former state premiers, including Jeff Kennett, Daniel Andrews, Steve Bracks, Gladys Berejiklian and Anna Bligh. Media chiefs, including Lachlan and Sarah Murdoch, Kerry Stokes and News Corp Australia Executive Chairman Michael Miller. Business figures, including Slater and Gordon Chairman James McKenzie, Company Director Diane Smith-Gander, RBA Board Member Carol Schwartz, Ian Narev and David Gonski. There's also sporting administrators, Gil McLaughlin, AFL Chairman Richard Goyder, Eddie Maguire, Tennis Australia boss Craig Tilley and NBL Chair Larry Kestelman, also America's Cup-winning skipper John Bertrand. Part of what they said is, and I quote, "We've been alarmed at the offensive language, vandalism and harassment occurring in our streets, in university campuses and outside public Australian landmarks, including the Opera House, Flinders Street Station and Parliament." They say to our Jewish employees, business partners, customers and all who are affected, we acknowledge the heightened feelings of threat being felt by your community right now and affirm your right to physical and psychological safety. The Fin Review reports that one signatory to this statement, who spoke on the basis of anonymity, said the situation was like 1920s Germany. Also showing support, Elon Musk made a solidarity trip to Israel, and this came after accusations that he'd agreed with an anti-Semitic comment on his Twitter platform, his X platform. Musk spent time touring the Kfar Aza kibbutz, where Hamas slaughtered families. He was there with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, also the President, Isaac Herzog. Now, this show of support from Australia's leaders in particular, but also Elon Musk, it sends a powerful and heartwarming message of support for Israel and for the Jewish community here in Australia, for Jewish Australians. It's a good reminder that sensible Australians, mainstream Australians, and this is the majority of us, not only don't support, but are outraged by the anti-Semitism and despicable aggression we're seeing from pro-Palestinian protesters who are targeting the Jewish community. It's not a reason to be complacent, though. We can't allow teachers, public school teachers, in the classroom where they work, funded by the taxpayer, to infect the minds of our impressionable children. We need to make sure that our political leaders put a stop, not just send a statement that they put a stop to public school teachers bringing this issue into the classroom. And our political leaders, by the way, also shouldn't be encouraging anti-Semitism by wrongly accusing Israel of being careless with civilian casualties. All right, let's bring in now Sky News host James Morrow. We're going to talk about this and some other big stories today. James, I've just reported here exclusively that teachers are being encouraged by the Federation to wear Palestinian scarves to school, to take pictures of themselves with pro-Gaza signs in the classroom and share it on social media. I know you did a report about a week ago when we saw this movement kicking off with teachers and school students being encouraged to protest. What do you think about this latest development?
Well, I just think that, it goes against so much common sense. It goes against the New South Wales Department of Education's contentious issues policy. It goes against policies that say that we need to be even-handed in the classroom when discussing tough issues, and to be really effectively cheerleading the Palestinian side here shows a real moral and intellectual, I think, deficiency on the part of the teachers who are pushing this. When I was in school, I don't know what it was like when you were there. I had teachers who I often disagreed with vehemently, but, you could have these sorts of back and forth and you learn to argue. This is teachers proselytizing a viewpoint, and it indicates to me that they have fallen into the trap of seeing everything through this sort of power relations game. Palestine is weak, Israel is strong, therefore we know who the goodies and the baddies are. This is not the way that you do nuanced discussion in the classroom. Do they talk about Oslo and how the Palestinians were offered 98% of everything on a plate by Bill Clinton and didn't take it because it was more fun or more advantageous for them to, fight? To talk about all sorts of other things, the history of the region. No, they just turned it into this simple, unnuanced power equation, and it's victims and goodies and baddies, and Israel becomes the baddies. And it's a real sickness, I think, that's creeped into all of our schools. And we see it generationally in how this issue is playing out, and they're encouraging it. It's very bad.
I think the other point to make, James, is that as a Jewish mother of young children, we do everything we can, most Jewish parents I speak to try and protect your children from the hatred that's out there at the moment. Everything we can to shield them from even knowing that there are people who hate our very existence living in Australia, protesting the right of our homeland to exist. And the idea that teachers would be wanting to bring this into the classroom, where if there is a Jewish student who does support Israel, who, would dare to express that view in the classroom, I mean, you just shudder to think how they would be bullied, not just by the other students, but by their teachers. And that's what's so sad and so unacceptable. James, let's move on to News Poll. This big story today in The Australian, it reveals 60% of 35 to 49-year-old voters believe they're worse off now than they were 2 years ago. I mean, that's kind of an obvious finding, but the issue is that it's this single figure that poses the most risk for Anthony Albanese.
Well, yeah, it does. And Sharri, I think there's something really interesting here. There's two interesting things about this. Number one, at the last federal election last year, we were told that basically the coalition, that conservative politics was over, that younger voters were always going to wind up, going the other way and going left, and that there was no future for the right in this country. And, now we see that this, younger group is now starting to say, not so sure that things are going our way. Now that's, in one way it's obvious, but in another way, it shows that almost like the Albanese government is now starting to follow the same trajectory that The Voice did, where younger and younger demographics started to become dissatisfied with the idea and realized that there wasn't a lot of there. And I think something similar is happening here, Sharri, because people are feeling it in their hip pockets. People are going into Christmas very, very nervous about their financial positions, and they don't see any sort of, for all their talk about, a child care benefit here and some rent assistance there. There's nothing holding this whole thing together. So there's nothing that, has people saying, we know why we're going through this and to what purpose. They just see pain, and they see, Albanese doing first The Voice and now all these foreign trips, which I've defended him on in the past. But, again, it just looks like he's not governing for Australians.
Yeah, exactly. That's the perception that's emerging. Look, another really big story today, we've learnt that one of those immigration detainees who's been released, well, the authorities now can't find him, can't contact him. This is despite the government committing to mandatory electronic monitoring of former detainees. We know now that 4 of the 141 have refused. One of the released detainees, who's a Malaysian assassin, is now asking for acceptance from the community. There's another person, another criminal who can't be traced. Shadow Immigration Minister Dan Tehan raised this in question time today. Let's have a quick look.
Can the Minister inform the House of the nature of this individual's crimes? And does the Minister know where this individual is now?
He would be well aware, as all members would be well aware, this government does not comment on operational or individual matters. The Australian community should be assured that all efforts coordinated under Operation Aegis are being made to track down this individual.
This is a really big story, James. So one of the released detainees was lost by police. He refused to wear an ankle bracelet, an electronic tracker. No one knows where he is now, and Labor in question time today just refused to release any more details.
Well, they refused to release any more detail, and I'm just looking at my phone because Claire O'Neill has just said in Parliament that they're moving to quickly finalise a tough preventative detention regime, and I believe that what they're trying to do is to use that clause in the decision that was handed down, which said, well, if there's a possibility of deportation, if that increases, that you could re-detain some of these people. I frankly don't know that that's going to wash, having read the entire High Court reasoning on this. The fact that, they went into this decision saying, oh, we think this will be fine, or claiming that they thought it was going to be fine, and then come back with a 7-0 shutout, I think shows the real poverty of their leadership on this issue, as does the fact that they had to be led by the nose to having any sort of monitoring regime when they didn't have legislation ready to go in the eventuality that the court did not go their way. This whole thing with this detainee, this was always going to happen. And of course, everybody is rightfully nervous. The government won't even tell us who this person is, what they did, why they were banged up in the first place, and they're citing privacy. I mean, Sharri, it's beggars belief.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, this whole matter has been a farce. I'm going to come back to it a bit later in the show with Liz Storer and Joe Hildebrand. James Morrow, thank you so much. We'll read your work tomorrow in the telly. Now, coming up, a mother whose son is still in Hamas captivity begs for his release. She's going to join me live after this break. Welcome back. Well, the White House says that Israel and Hamas will extend the pause in fighting for another 2 days, although Israel hasn't confirmed this deal just yet.
The humanitarian pause in Gaza, now in its 4th day, will be extended for another 2 days through Thursday morning Israel time. This humanitarian pause has already brought a halt to the fighting, together with a surge of humanitarian assistance. Now, in order to extend the pause, Hamas has committed to releasing another 20 women and children over the next 2 days. We would, of course, hope to see the pause extended further, and that will depend upon Hamas continuing to release hostages.
We have to go back ultimately because we have to defeat Hamas and make a new situation in Gaza. You've got to understand, as long as Hamas is in power, Israelis don't feel safe. We saw what they did on October 7th, and their leadership proclaims that they do that sort of attack again and again and again. To put it simply, Pete, Israelis simply refuse to live any longer next to this terror enclave on our southern border.
So this extension of the deal by another 2 days will see the release of 10 Israelis per day, and this in exchange for 50 Palestinian criminals from Israeli prisons. The fact Hamas wants this continued ceasefire when they don't care about aid, they use civilians as human shields, well, this shows they're in retreat. The Red Cross was supposed to have access to the hostages who have not been freed by the 4th day of the ceasefire. This was part of the deal between Hamas and Israel, but this still hasn't happened. The reason why Hamas is blocking the Red Cross from visiting is because this would mean it would have to reveal exactly how many hostages Hamas is holding and what condition they're in. It would take away Hamas's leverage over Israel. Now, we've been anxiously waiting for the release of this beautiful 10-month-old baby. But in devastating news, this isn't going to happen, well, at least not now. Hamas has admitted that it's not able to release the sweet 10-month-old and his 4-year-old brother, Ariel, and they've spent 51 days in captivity because they're being held by another terror group in the southern Gaza city of Khan Yunis. According to Israel, this man you can see circled here is the Hamas terrorist who kidnapped the family from their home in Nir Oz. But then they were farmed off to another terror faction that's refused to cooperate on the release of the hostages. Now, this is what we've been reporting on this program for nearly a week now, that Hamas does not have all the hostages and doesn't even have clarity about where they are. Kafir, and Kafir is the name of that 10-month-old baby, had just learned to crawl when he was abducted, and then the terror happened. And this image here from a video clip when Kafir and Ariel's mum, Sharri, was abducted with her 2 young children. You can see very clearly there the terror on her face. These are the innocent families that are being used as pawns by Hamas and other despicable terror groups. Now, I've spoken a lot about the abhorrent and unspeakable treatment of Israeli children, innocent Israeli children, at the hands of these grotesque, murderous terrorists, masked monsters. But it should not be lost on anyone that these Hamas terrorists, absolutely driven by extreme bloodlust for Jewish lives, are solely responsible for the death of Palestinian babies and children that they wantonly use as shields for their vile genocidal agenda. It's a tragedy for these Palestinian children who, if they're lucky enough to survive under the terrorist reign, will have little hope of a peaceful and free life. It's why Israel must destroy Hamas for the benefit of both Israelis and Palestinians. It's disgusting that Hamas has no regard for Jewish children, and equally sad that they care so little for the lives of their own people, their own Palestinian children. Now, meanwhile, families of Israeli hostages have arrived in Australia to send a reminder to our political leaders in Canberra that their loved ones shouldn't be forgotten. 5 family members of Jews who were kidnapped or murdered on October 7 are here to meet with the Australian government. They held a press conference today where they spoke about this ongoing trauma.
That's my brother, Amit Shani. He's 16. We have 2 more groups that been left that could be released. This morning I got the call. He's not on the list. Half of my friends are either kidnapped or dead, and some of them are already been released, and of course it makes me so happy, but you know, my own blood is there.
His last word was, I think I'm going to die. I don't have air. I write him that maybe he can open the window. But then he wrote me, no, they are waiting for me outside. They will kill me. And from that moment until now, we don't know nothing about him.
I have 4 friends that were murdered at this party. I have 2 that survived. And Noah is the last one that is like my last hope. Any sense in the dark of someone that maybe can get saved from this horrible thing.
And some of these family members will join me live here on the show on Thursday when they're in Sydney. You can hear the anguish in their voices as they bravely campaign while their loved ones are in dark underground tunnels in the control of a genocidal jihadi terror group. Now, my guest now, Idit Ohal, last received a text message from her 22-year-old son at 8 a.m. on the day that Hamas attacked the supernova rave in the desert. The text came from a field shelter where Hamas was throwing in grenades to kill those inside. Let's bring in Idit now. Thank you so much for joining us for this interview. What did your son say to you the last time you had contact with him?
So he sent me a message on WhatsApp saying that he's okay. He's in a bomb shelter, but he's fine. At this time when he was writing this message, They thought there was just rockets, and they were trying to get, find shelter from their body from the rockets. They didn't think there were Hamas around. They didn't think there was going to be this terrible attack. Actually, the message got to me at 8:08 o'clock in the morning, but he sent it like around 7:50. Wi-Fi inside, inside the bomb shelter. So when the Hamas took my son from the bomb shelter, grabbing him firmly and on the ground, his phone fell, and that's exactly the time where I got the message. So probably at 8:08, that's when he was taken from me, from the bomb shelter.
Have you heard anything about the conditions he's being held in, how he's doing, where he is, which group he's being held captive with? Have you heard anything since then?
No, I have not heard anything. Nobody tells me anything. We don't know anything. There's a footage of him being taken from Hamas. It's a terrible footage. We can actually see it's been like how they take him and grabbing him and grabbing him by his hair and pulling him up on the truck. He was taken from this bomb shelter where two of his friends were murdered that day, and one friend survived to tell us about it. It's a terrible ordeal.
Edith, your son is 22 years old, so that would mean he's not likely to be released in this current group. Is that right? Because Hamas has only agreed to the release of women and children, no men.
But we still have hope. There's one man that was released. He's 26-year-old. Ronnie is his name, and he was released. He has a dual citizenship with Russia. My son has a dual relationship with Serbia. I don't know what it means. I don't know if it's helpful, but some things are political or whatever. I have no idea. We're still wishing and hoping that things will be, that somebody will tell us something, or that he will be, that he'll come home, that he'll return. Yeah, obviously.
Edith, just finally, knowing your son as you do, and as mothers, all we want to do, our whole life's mission is to protect our children. How do you think he'd be coping in there, in those underground tunnels?
Listen, we're in our house. We're an optimistic family. I taught him a lot, and he's a strong and person that he always gives to others and helps others. I believe that if he has a purpose in helping others around him in this situation, it will help him cope emotionally with this. I know that he gets really good contacts with people, and I think he has hope. And one thing he has that is very important is his music. He plays the piano, he's a musician. So I'm thinking that maybe he's in his mind, he's thinking about this music, and maybe that will give him hope. The fact that he is doing some, in his mind, magic things. That's the only thing I think is relevant for now. Is I believe that nobody can take you away from you what you have in your mind and what you're thinking. So that's his strength.
Yeah, so true. Such an important message, Edith. Just know that everyone in Australia, all sensible people in Australia, will be thinking of you and praying with you and the other families of the hostages. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for you. Thank you, Sharri. Thank you.
Now, another big story today. Brittany Higgins has returned to the witness box to give evidence in this high-stakes defamation trial after her rape case against her former Liberal colleague Bruce Lerman fell over last year. Julia Bradley, our Sky News reporter, has been following the defamation case this week. Of course, this is the case that Lohman launched against Channel 10 and also Lisa Wilkinson. Julia, you're at the federal court. What has happened? What has Brittany Higgins said this afternoon?
Well, Sharri, this afternoon we saw Brittany Higgins flanked by her lawyer and her fiancé as she arrived here at the federal court to give preliminary evidence as part of this defamation trial, which, as you say, has been launched by her former colleague and alleged rapist Bruce Lohman following the collapse of that rape trial in Canberra last year. Now, Brittany Higgins this afternoon was asked about her early career, her political aspirations as well, where she told the court, "I wanted to work my way up through the ranks. I wanted to be a media advisor. I wanted to be like a press secretary, essentially." Now, Network 10's lawyer, Matthew Collins, KC, has foreshadowed Ms Higgins will give graphic and distressing evidence about her alleged rape inside Parliament House in 2019 when she again takes to the witness box. In outlining his case to the court, Mr Collins has suggested that Mr Lohman's suggestion that Ms Higgins fabricated the rape claim is monstrous. Network 10 is expecting to call more than 20 witnesses, including Liberal staffers, councillors, family members and police. The channel is relying on a truth defence to battle claims its interview with Ms Higgins was defamatory. Now, Lisa Wilkinson's lawyer, Sue Chrysanthou SC, has today maintained that the 2021 story, which aired on The Project, was in the public interest. Also revealed today revelations that 7 Network is paying for Mr Lohman's accommodation for 12 months under an exclusive deal which included an interview with the program's Spotlight. Now, the cross-examination of Bruce Lohman has now wrapped up. He's been quizzed about whether he read an email from the project's producer asking him for comment prior to that broadcast. He's been asked about Lisa Wilkinson's Logie's speech. At one point, he also called a speech that Scott Morrison made in Parliament stupid. This trial continues tomorrow, Sharri.
All right, Julia Bradley, thank you so much for the update, and we'll keep covering that on the show this week. Now, still to come, how is it that the federal Labor government managed to lose some of these hardened criminals released from detention? I'll discuss this with Jo Hildebrand and Liz Storer next. If you're just tuning in now, here are the top 5 stories you need to know tonight. Hamas and Israel are said to have agreed to extend their truce by 48 hours. Labor ministers attempted to resettle sex offender NZYQ to another Five Eyes country as he fought the High Court. Billionaire Elon Musk has visited an Israeli kibbutz attacked by Hamas days after tweets that saw him accused of anti-Semitism. Indigenous leader Pat Dodson announces he'll retire from politics on Australia Day next year, and the royal family is facing fresh racism claims after a new book alleged the Prince and Princess of Wales have a painting of a black man with an offensive title in their drawing room. All right, let's return to this big unfolding scandal today. This story broken by the Daily Telegraph today that the federal government has no idea where some, at least one of the criminals released from immigration detention are, while others are refusing to wear ankle bracelets. Let's bring in Jo Hildebrand and Liz Storer. Great to see both of you. Jo, so give us some more detail in this case. How can the government lose track of criminals, and how dangerous are the criminals that are now
well, this is the thing, isn't it? From what I can gather, and it is very unclear, largely because the government refused to answer questions on this, and Immigration Minister Andrew Giles again refused to answer questions on this in Parliament, saying that it was an operational matter.
They're so transparent.
Doesn't look like it's operating very well, but anyway.
Transparent. I love that they were elected on that.
That's right. The Teals will be very upset about this. But there are a couple of things. One is this guy is just uncontactable, and he's just gone AWOL.
He's just mixing his mobile phone calls.
And we just don't know. Like, has he changed his mobile phone number to private?
Like, coming up again.
What is going on there? The AFP have said that that of the 4, and there's a 5 number being thrown around, the AFP have said that they think they are lower risk. But again, you've got, even on the other end of the spectrum, you've got someone who killed the mother of his children, his wife. His daughters are now living in fear in Sydney. And their stepfather is now saying, well, hang on a minute, you know, whether this guy has an ankle bracelet or not, he killed his wife. the ankle bracelet's probably not going to do that much, and he can't be deported either. So it's a real omni-shambles, which of course is a euphemism for a word I can't say on television, and I think the government's going to have to get on top of it.
Liz, this is potentially the single biggest scandal for the Albanese government, and it very clearly shows that our national security, their ministers have been weak. You can't even argue with that.
Oh, 100%. Claire O'Neill is so completely out of her depth. It's a new embarrassment absolutely every day, how she chooses to deal with this, or rather not deal with it. I must say, still blaming Dutton, oh, this was the previous governments, etc. and so on. The problem is now, you knew it was before the High Court for months. You made absolutely no plan A, B or C. Now we're being told that these detainees wearing bracelets, which again is thanks to Dutton. Like, the opposition has really become almost like almost like a de facto government during this time.
The idea he was sitting there writing policy from the opposition leaders'
Exactly. Were those amendments not passed, God only knows would have gotten up that day. But thankfully, they did rush something through. But now we're being told that certain detainees have refused. I'm sorry, how is that even possible? You are here in Australia. You are here. We're already being extremely gracious that you're still on our shores, and you get to refuse.
I mean, I didn't know criminals could refuse to wear an ankle bracelet.
I don't think they can.
Joe,
I think
what if the rest of the 140 hear that they've been, a group of 8 or 4? It's unclear the figures, but if the rest of the 140 hear that, oh, actually, you can refuse to wear them.
It shouldn't be an option. It's a strange language. I don't think that the AFP again are saying, or the relevant police forces, because I have to use state police, I think, in some cases, but the AFP are saying, obviously, you can't refuse to do it. If it's an order by them, you have to follow it.
So why aren't they wearing them?
Well, they're going to make them, basically. But again, this is the problem. We've got a government that, again, is
they're not wearing it. They're not wearing it. And how long have they been out for? About 2 weeks
they're
now.
Not. That's right. So the AFP obviously has to figure out a way how they can force them to wear it and make them wear it. So they haven't done it of their own accord.
That really shouldn't be hard to figure out.
Of course it should.
And again, Claire O'Neill interview recently on some morning program, and she was being asked, well, how many of them are wearing it? How many of them are not? And she just kept saying they're being rolled out.
Well, there was that other interview where she said, oh, that's a question for Immigration Minister Andrew Giles, a minister who is her junior counterpart, and that was seen, within Labor as shafting her junior
I believe that's called a hospital pass. And again, Claire O'Neill is usually pretty sensible. She's been sensible in other things, but she's clearly been caught completely wrong-footed by this, and hopefully the government will learn from it. But again, if just one of these offenders or detainees ends up committing a crime, or someone gets hurt as a result of them being in the community, that will be, that's almost an all-over Red Rover moment. So the government's got to be very, very careful.
Why is that what it would take? I mean, they should be acting like that is a very real possibility any minute of every single day, and they're not.
And no, they've done everything sort of the wrong way round, which is firstly to say that they have no power to fix the problem, then to say that the problem's actually not that bad and these people are low risk or whatever, then to say, oh, well, we'll just have to wait and see what the High Court says with its reasons, blah, blah, and there's nothing we can do right now. Something like this, the first thing you have to make sure is that the government is more concerned, more angry, more outraged and more determined to do it than the people in the community who are wanting it to act. And that's what you do.
Now, very quickly before we go, I want to return to the exclusive story I had at the start of the show tonight for anyone who's just tuned in. I had a big story that New South Wales teachers are planning on wearing the Palestinian scarf into the classroom, and are being urged by the Teachers Federation to share images of them holding signs in support of Gaza taken in the classroom on social media. Joe, this is against their code of conduct, and it risks bullying Jewish students.
Yeah, clearly this is completely inappropriate. Teachers cannot and should not bring politics into the classroom. I love teachers, my mum's a teacher, but this is an absolute red flag, and the Teachers Federation should be telling teachers not to do it, far from encouraging them to do it. So, and again, anyone who specialises in education, you would think would be more educated about the background of this conflict.
Liz, very quickly, you would hope that the New South Wales government is actually going to enforce the code of conduct and discipline teachers who breached the rules.
Well, the Victorian government certainly hasn't, and it was just yesterday that news broke of the Victorian branch, the teachers' unions getting involved there, encouraging them to do the same. So where are the premiers to put their foot down here? We're simply not seeing that happen. They'll bleat away, as we saw the Victorian Education Minister do yesterday, saying, oh, we'd really prefer you didn't, and I certainly personally condemn this. I'm sorry, that's not good enough. You're the government. You're allowing this to take place in our schools. We've already had the school walkouts last week, which, again, shouldn't have been possible. They're the government. Nobody else can issue an edict and say, we're actually putting our foot down now. These are state schools. These are school hours. You're not doing anything of the sort. And you're encouraging such division among kids. Because even if they just don't attend that march, all the kids that do have already put a target on your back.
One thing, but the teachers bringing this issue into the classroom is just next level.
But overtly taking a side in a foreign conflict. I mean, it's different to come in and say, hey, I want peace.
Yeah.
But to actually say, no, I'm with this side of this incredibly complex conflict.
This is what the teachers, the state, have done throughout every socialist, Marxist, communist movement. They harness
That's why literacy and numeracy rates are struggling so badly.
Yes.
Jo Hildebrand, Liz Storer, thank you so much. After the break, a sneak peek at my documentary airing at 8 o'clock tonight on the origins of COVID-19. We'll bring you some exclusive details. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Well, tonight, our new documentary into the origins of COVID-19 is airing at 8 p.m. We have fresh revelations about a Chinese military scientist who some intelligence agencies believe may have started the pandemic. Zhou Yusen was creating a vaccine for COVID-19 as early as October 2019, and then months after he filed the patent for this vaccine, he died.
He was one of the first individuals to publish a patent for a SARS-CoV-2 vaccine.
So where does that take the time frame back to? Where would Zhou Yusen have had to start working on his vaccine for COVID-19?
No later than October of 2019.
What do you think about this statement? Zhou Yusen may have been killed by the People's Liberation Army for accidentally starting COVID-19.
It's certainly possible. We considered that as a plausible possibility. However, we had no evidence to make that assessment.
For the first time tonight, the former Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, Dr. Robert Cadlick, who you saw just there, fronts the cameras to divulge the confidential conversations he had with Anthony Fauci, where they decided to downplay the lab leak theory. This was ostensibly to encourage cooperation from China in the early days of the pandemic, but now Cadlick says that Fauci had his own reason to downplay the lab leak, that he needed to protect his reputation and that of his institute because it had been funding research in Wuhan. Cadlick is haunted by the downstream effects, that's the term he uses, downstream effects of the decision that they made to divert attention away from accusations of a lab leak. He says he still lies awake at night reflecting on what they did.
I wake up at usually about 2 or 3 a.m. and think about it, honestly, because, it's something that we all played a role in. Yes, we had some successes, we had some failures, and yet I think it's important to know what happened, because we know that in the past it could happen in an animal wet market, but we need to understand now it could happen in a lab.
So eager were officials and scientists to shield China from any suggestion its scientific research had started the pandemic and to protect their own research from being subject to new regulations. There was complicity among the international scientists in downplaying or entirely rejecting the lab leak theory. So you can see all of that at 8 o'clock tonight right here on Sky News. Thanks so much for watching. I'll be back 5 o'clock tomorrow.